Coffee from back there? You. Oh, you refilled. This is the good stuff. This is from Twin Valley Coffee. We've taken a step up, a big step up, right? How's it taste? You can't tell? You're too good for our coffee. Oh, I see, yeah. Okay, well, we weren't clear on that. You're right. I don't think I emphasized that. Folks, announcement. We're serving Twin Valley coffee. Now you know. It's not the old cheap stuff. And this actually contributes to missionaries like the parks. So every time we buy coffee, we're sending some of those funds go to support the parks in Chile. So there's a double blessing. It's not only good coffee, but it helps support our missionaries. All right, folks. You know what? This is the best way of using our time. While I get myself set up, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take and turn to the back of your handout, and I want you to find somebody, another human, please, to do a little bit of practice, okay? This is where we stopped last time. Anybody still need a handout? We can put the leftovers. Could you put the leftovers back there at the booth? That's a good idea. While I get myself set up, here's what I would like for you to try to do. Some of you say, well, I don't want to do this early in the morning. I just came in here to hear you. I want you to practice a little bit. So this is what we called the pro-life position in 5 minutes or less, right? And you'll notice down, what if you only have 60 seconds? What if you only have 6 seconds? I want you to start a conversation. Somebody needs to play the part of maybe the devil's advocate, maybe to be in the pro-choice, pro-abort position, while the other one tries to discuss the pro-life position. Does everybody understand that? You can either use the human rights argument at the top. That's the one we're kind of parked on here for today. Or you can use the one that we've been talking about, the formally deductive argument. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Okay? Can everybody do that? Find another human being to talk to? I guess you could talk to yourself if you'd rather. But while I get set up here, I want you practicing, okay? Start now. And if your last name's Fuller, you better be practicing. Are you ready to do this with me? Sure. Can I have a handheld for Carissa? We're going to do a little role play. Oh, well, if I grab one of those, can I grab one of those? Yeah, I'll grab one of them up here. Yep. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2. I think that's on. Is that on? That's probably mine. Testing, test. There we go. Good. Thank you. Looks like we've got some great apologetic conversations going. Or either you're talking about how delicious the coffee is. Did you stump Rick? Is that why you're going to? Jill stumped Rick. I could see it. He was like, what do I say to that? You're too old to have a child? Hey, you know what? You might be onto something there. What's that? Sarah said that too, and they laughed. So that's where that conversation went when you guys were trying to practice pro-life conversing. That's funny. Hey, we're going to do a little role play here. My daughter agreed to do this, and thank you, Carissa. So Carissa is going to act like this is a scenario. We've got a pro-life exhibit set up, a table set up, and I'm manning that table, and Carissa comes along, and we're going to act like we've already started a conversation, and I'm asking her now what her position is on whether or not the unborn should have human rights, okay? So this is how a conversation might go. Again, this is very staged. Okay, here we go. Hello, what is your name?
My name is Carissa.
Well, hi, Carissa. My name is Brian. Thanks for dropping by our table, and I appreciate you signing up for our emails. I want to ask you the question we've been asking everybody who comes by our table is, do you think the unborn, the preborn, deserve human rights?
We should only give human rights to those who have sentience, self-awareness, and feeling pain.
So you think only the people who have sentience, which is self-awareness and feelings, should have human rights?
Yes, I believe that is what makes you a person.
So if you have the ability to be self-aware, conscious, feel pain, sentience, that makes you a person?
Yes.
So what do you think makes you a human being than a person? What makes them an actual person?
Because that is what distinguishes us from animals. This is why we are important.
Oh, I see. So your argument is that the unborn, until they can have the ability to have self-awareness, they're not much more than an animal. and that's what makes us different from animals. So I am a little confused. When you say feeling pain, would you agree that pigeons experience pain?
Well, to a certain extent, but not like what we have.
Okay. So do you think it's murder to kill, let's say, a rat? Like fumigate them?
I am a vegetarian.
Oh, you're vegetarian. I see. Okay. Well, but do you think killing a rat is the same as killing like a 3-year-old?
They both make me sad, but one more than the other.
Okay. So they both make you sad, killing the rat or killing the 3-year-old. Does one make you more sad than the other?
The 3-year-old.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Well, the 3-year-old, can you tell me then why the 3-year-old makes you more sad than fumigating the rat?
Well, the 3-year-old is at the level of sentience, and no one wants to kill a 3-year-old.
Okay. So the 3-year-old's at a level that the rat isn't. I see. So burning building, let's use this scenario. Burning building, you have a cat and you have a newborn baby. Which one are you going to save?
Newborn baby.
Okay, but aren't they both sentient? Aren't they both self-aware?
Well, the newborn baby is at a different level, right?
Okay, so the newborn baby's at a different level of sentience and self-awareness than the cat. What's the different level?
The baby is a human being like me and you, and the cat is part of a different species.
Oh, so the cat's a different species now, so it's not about sentience. Well, what species would you put the unborn? What species do unborn humans belong to?
Well, human, but without the sentience.
Okay. So the sentience isn't the most important thing because you saved the human being rather than the cat.
If you are human and have sentience, you are more important.
Okay. Well, again, that's interesting. Have you ever heard of ableism?
No.
Okay. Well, ableism is the discrimination against someone who doesn't have the ability that other people have. So you hear the word able there. Ableism is when we start discriminating against certain humans because they don't have certain abilities that other humans have. Do you think it's okay to discriminate against someone who can't walk, for instance, or someone who can't speak, or someone who can't see, or someone who can't hear? Do you think that's okay to discriminate against somebody who has less abilities than another person and has certain abilities or more abilities?
No.
So do you see how taking one ability like sentience and saying that defines a human person is discriminating?
Yes, I do. I am now pro-life.
Wow! You see how powerful this is? Just like that. Thank you, honey. Give her a hand. Good job. I had to really convince her to do that, so you did a great job. All right. Take out your handout, please, from today. And just as a reminder where we were last time, and we may have to do some makeup here to make sure that we cover all the topics that we have on our syllabus. But if you could pull out your handout that I gave you today. And I can find mine. Then we can get started here. Nothing like a good John Calvin quote, all right? We have a quote over here by John Calvin, but he was commenting on Exodus 21, 22 to 25. I love this quote. If it seems horrible to kill a man in his own house than in a field, because a man's house is his place of most secure refuge, it ought surely to be deemed more atrocious to destroy a fetus in the womb before it has come to light. He's got a good argument there, doesn't he? That it's wrong to murder someone, period, yes? But he's making the point that the place that ought to be the safest ought to be your home, right? So it's one thing to kill somebody out in a back alley. They're both murder. But to kill somebody in their own home, it seems like that ought to be the place where you're the most what? Protected. So he's making this argument, which I think is a good one. Now, this is where we stopped last time, but just to bring it back to our attention, humans have value simply because they are what? Human. Not because of some acquired property that they may gain or lose during their lifetime. If you deny this, it's difficult to account for fundamental human equality for anyone. So what we tried to do last time is take our argument simply from the strict deductive argument that says it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion is intentionally killing an innocent human being, therefore abortion is wrong. And we've moved this now to another argument. I'm not certain that this is any necessarily stronger argument. It's just a different argument that's going to deal with human rights. This one, though, addresses what oftentimes is the only reply to take away from the premise of that deductive argument, is that the human being is not a true human what? Person, okay? So if you're wanting something that's going to help us more in the conversation to prove the personhood of this human being without necessarily going presuppositionally to our Bible, human rights argument is one of the best arguments to have. So you understand what we're doing here? We're looking at it from expecting that our very good syllogism, that super strong, airtight, deductive argument that I just gave you, if they do an end around and they quibble with whether the human being is actually a person and that they haven't reached personhood yet, and that requires a certain ability, the human rights argument is going to help us answer that. Okay? Is everybody with me? You tracking? At least give me a head nod if you're tracking. Okay, good. All right. So here's the review. We contend that from the earliest stages of development, the unborn are distinct, living, and whole human organisms. Okay? That is the embryology argument. That is establishing that they're human beings, that you are actually killing a human being, a member of the species Homo sapien, the same species that we're part of. That is what you're doing. But again, now we're going to realize that science can only do certain things. So if you're filling in the blanks, here's your first one. Science only can tell us certain things. What can science not tell us? Now, let's just remind ourselves what science has taught us, and I've already given you that. So just popcorn style class, remind us, what can science teach us about the unborn? Embryologists, those who study the entirety of the gestation period from fertilization, what do they say about the unborn? Have their own DNA. What else? What's that? Cells are multiplying. They're copying, they're multiplying. They have DNA, they have RNA. Ultimately, they're going to build proteins in their systems. What else? Continue to grow unless you kill them. Self-driven. Okay? So embryology actually tells us a lot, right? About what are the unborn or who are the unborn, okay? So it's a wonderful place to start, but science has limitations, and I'm trying to get you to answer this without me giving it to you. What would you immediately say is, you can use your own words here, I'm not looking for a certain word, but where are the boundaries of science in terms of ethics? They can't tell you values. They can't teach you morality, right? So science is going to tell you, scientifically, this is what this is, all right? So the embryologist, it's not like there's this big debate with sections of embryology where they're saying, well, we're not sure, but maybe it's human. I mean, across the board, and we've mentioned so many quotes, and just to double check this, all you have to do is go to the typical, most likely a public school, public school and Christian school, and it doesn't matter the worldview, but you open up a biology book and you can double check this, and they're still saying that life begins at fertilization. This is when human beings begin to have a life, where the sperm and the egg disappear and a new organism's formed. But again, as you just mentioned, Matt, there's morality, there's ethics. That's the boundary. Science is not really going to give you answers there. Now, so science can't, here's some categories that science doesn't help us in. Science doesn't tell you, don't come out of a lab saying it's wrong to hurt toddlers, for instance, right? You're going to need You're going to need some morality and some ethics for that. Everybody with me? Another category that it doesn't help you is it's wrong to beat your spouse. Now, I hope that we have solidarity and consensus in the room that it's wrong to hurt toddlers, it's wrong to beat your spouse. But science, I'm trying to get you to see, doesn't help you in that category, all right? So we don't come out of the science lab or the embryologist who's just told us, that's a human being, that now we have a sense of morality. We're going to need another argument. Why the unborn have a right to life, and this is what our topic is. What I'm trying to get you to see is if you have determined that this conversation, not that you're ashamed of the Bible at all, and I know you're not, but if you're saying, I would like to have pro-life conversations that work with a person's conscience and their intellect without bringing in the Bible, because my biggest concern in this pro-life boot camp is to have conversations that are going to be conversations that lead to change of heart and mind. I want them to have a different position. I want them to think through what's happening in an abortion. Now, again, I hope you know that this is a Sunday class, and there is no shame here, nor is there any desire for me to say to you, don't turn in your Bible if someone has a legitimate question. But I'm assuming that most of the conversations you're going to have with people who are pro-choice or pro-abort are not going to be coming from a biblical worldview. So that presupposition, while I hold it, that the Bible is the perfect Word of God, it gives us all the answers for faith and life, yes? That's not going to be my first choice in these kinds of conversations. Because for some, I'm going to need to now establish, do you believe that the Bible is authoritative? And I could spend all my time trying to prove that the Bible is authoritative and never get to the conversation about why we should not be killing the unborn. So that's the reason why we're not saying, hey, let me give you 15 Bible verses on why abortion's wrong. Is everybody with me on that? Okay, so we can't get there from science, so we're going to have to go past embryology. And here was the last phrase that I just wanted you to put. The science of embryology tells us the unborn are humans. That's it. It's a strong argument, but it doesn't tell us about personhood, and personhood is going to start leading us to ethics. Because if I stay with humans, and some of you have seen this dead end, this cul-de-sac, you've been in a conversation where they may admit, yeah, it's a human being, but it's not like a person human being. So you've got human and non-human persons. So you've got, both of them are human, but not both of them have personhood. And that affects the ethics of whether they should be aborted or not. You see what I'm saying? Any questions on that? Just want to make sure we know what path we're going on now. Here are the major things that are going to be said and the distinguishing marks between personhood, having personhood, or just being human beings. And here they are. The first one is going to be an argument about substance things versus property things. Can we say that sentence together just to keep you engaged? Substance things versus property things. Now, this is somewhat of a philosophical category or categories, but they're helpful for you to understand that the script, that is not my daughter's beliefs, I promise you. The script that my daughter was reading from or working through that conversation from with me was a position that was actually questioning whether the human being is substantive or if it's just property. Here's the difference. Substant things are living organisms that maintain their identities throughout time. So they don't change their fundamental identity based on any times in their development. So from conception, in this case, from fertilization, all the way to death, they don't change their fundamental identity. Whereas property things do. And I've given you some illustrations. Property things, such as cars and machines, do not. So substance things are living organisms that maintain their identities. Property things, such as cars and machines, do not maintain their identity throughout time. Some of you know this if you have, I'm just going to share a lifelong dream that I have and with you. This has nothing to do with this topic, but it's something precious to me. So I feel like I can share it with you, your friends. I don't think I'm coveting it. It's something I've always wanted, though. So it's kind of a life dream. I want to have a 1973 VW Bug. And I want 73 because I was born that year. And I would like to completely renovate it. And the gas mileage is unbelievable with these VW Bugs. And I want one. And I want one really bad. I'm part of Facebook groups and they show up on my feed. And I just keep thinking, once all the kids are married and through college, that's what's going to happen. So maybe it'll happen. But what's going to happen when I do get that 73 Bug is there's going to need to be some renovation. And many of these, they've got a new engine in them or a rebuilt engine. And if you've done any kind of restoring of cars or vehicles, you understand that car, while it's the same car, it's not really the same identity. So you put a new engine, a new transmission, it looks like the same car, but it's not really because it's got new, improved, rebuilt. It's not the same thing that came off the what? The assembly line. This comes back to that old illustration about when does a car become a car? So I want to bring that back to your mind again. This is the difference between substance and property. There is a moment where on that assembly line or off that assembly line that vehicle that is being put together, constructed, becomes an automobile. Anybody want to tell me where they think that happens at? We don't have to agree on this, but let me start here. How many of you agree that it doesn't become an automobile as soon as it starts on the assembly line? Do we all agree that that's not when it is an automobile? I mean, so the first piece of metal that starts, it's not quite there. Okay, so give me some opinions here. When does it become an automobile? So when the change order goes through the production office and it's scanned as it's already gone through quality control, you think it starts in an automobile before even a piece is put together. Glenn, you're not helping me at all with this. I mean, you were so helpful a few weeks back when you said the bark about the dog, but now you have gone right with the pro aborts and you've taken my argument and spit on it and stomped on it. Okay, so when the guy starts it up, now it's an automobile. Okay, so would you be okay with buying an automobile when it's just a concept? Oh, okay, you have. Okay, you're one of those beautiful people. I've never been in that moment. Hey, build me a car. I'll go ahead and pay for it. Okay, somebody besides Glenn help me with my illustration that just got stomped on. When does it become a car? When the body assembly, okay. I think most of us, besides Glenn, would say that the car becomes an automobile at some point, either after it's fully assembled or when it has wheels and you can start it up and it has an engine. How is that different? So we have property and we have substance. What we're saying with the substance view is that these are living organisms that maintain their essential identity from fertilization all the way to death. That's not true of a machine, and that's not true of an automobile, okay? Which is basically a machine. All of these get their identity by having the summation of their parts and actually can be changed by replacing some of the integral, important, functional elements of that machine, right? So they're not actually the same machine 30 years later. I know this, Glenn, I'm coming back at you. The boat that you own, you have changed some very important features to that boat. Go ahead, since you decimated my other illustration, and tell us. We're friends, actually, so we can enjoy this. Glenn, tell me some of the major elements you've replaced of your boat that you enjoy throughout the summer. And what's the title of your boat again? No, you have a name on it. Sold the farm. You did sell the farm in order to buy the boat, right? But sold the farm, and that boat, although it still has the same name, it's not essentially the same boat because you have changed out one of the major pieces of equipment that drive that boat. The point is that substance versus property is a very different identity. So let's just illustrate this in terms of one of Abraham Lincoln's quotes that I wanted to share with you. Now, he's talking about this identity versus substance. And we live in a culture now where you hear this phrase often, and identity politics. You know what I'm talking about? When we talk about identity politics, we start taking a certain demographic in our country or our world, and we begin to place and pit one group against another based on their identity. Well, listen to what Lincoln says about slavery. You say A is white and B is black. It is a color, then. The lighter having the right to enslave the darker? Take care. By this rule, you are a slave to the first man you meet with a fairer skin than your own. You do not mean color exactly. You mean the whites are intellectually the superiors of the blacks, and therefore have the right to enslave them. Take care again. By this rule, you are to be a slave to the first man you meet with an intellect superior to your own. But you say it's a question of interest. And if you can make it your interest, you have the right to enslave another. Very well. And if he can make it his interest, he has a right to enslave you. Do you see what Lincoln's saying there? So let's say it's something that's not essential. It's not substantive. It's just what we call property. So if there's something about me that makes me more valuable than another person. So he starts with skin color because that was the big debate. He goes further. What was the second thing he said? Intellect. So now, okay, it's intellect. I'm superior to that other human being because I have greater smarts than they do. And then he goes, your own financial interest. He says, remember, this could go both ways, because if at one point your skin gets darker than someone else's, now you're going to be enslaved. Or if your intellect is found to be less than someone else's, they could enslave you. Or if your interests now are below their interests, you could be enslaved. What he's getting at, Lincoln is, our 16th president, is this exact thing. That is the argument about essential substance of personhood that makes them valuable? Or is it some property about them, some ability that they're going to have later on? We could illustrate it like this real quickly. And the pro-life argument here is substance argument says that you are identical to the embryo you once were. So at that moment where as an embryo, you didn't have a brain assembled fully at that point or a heart, but at that moment you have essentially in substance all of the living organisms that maintain throughout your lifetime. Maybe we could think of it this way. If you lose an arm, does that make you any less of a human being than you are right now? Somebody in this room, perhaps before you die, could lose a limb from an accident of some sort. Does that make you, let's just take the argument, does that make you any less of a person because you went from a certain amount of substance and now we're looking at you and there's less property, if I can say it that way. There's less property associated with you than before. Your DNA never changed. Sure. So you get somebody else's kidney, you get someone else's heart, like Kylie Dart, or it doesn't make you anything less. But in a car, it would kind of change the assembly process, right? The argument we're going to get to in just a minute that sentience or self-awareness or self-consciousness makes you a person. So until you get that, you're not really a person. Well, let's just take that argument and say, okay, if we keep the property argument, certain properties or abilities make you a person rather than just a human, what about the person who is in a motorcycle accident and they're in a coma for 18 months? Now, they don't have sentience for 18 months. Does that mean that those 18 months that they are less valuable because they have lost significant property that makes them essentially a human person? Now, I think this is rhetorical, but I'm simply giving it to you because if this is a conversation you're having, whether they use the word substance versus property, this is the category of philosophy that you're in. They're essentially saying that we are property until we get the major parts. And usually the major parts is sentience, self-awareness, and the ability to have self-consciousness. Now, I mentioned 2 weeks ago, and probably the week before that, that scares me because I don't have sentience until I'm like 4. So this argument, if it were to stand, and it's sometimes good to point this out, that's where you kind of trot in the toddler, that this kind of argument that you have to have self-consciousness and you know you're a real person distinct from other persons and your memory needs to be established, for some of us that gets up to 4 or 5 years old. So now we have opened the door for infanticide, right? So if property is what makes you a human person, and if sentience is that property characteristic, then this is beyond being just the unborn. You see what I'm saying? Because that property quality, for most people, I mean, none of us in this room, when I asked last time, what was your first memory? Nobody said, when they took me over to that table and started giving me my vitals. I mean, nobody said that because nobody remembers that. You don't remember getting whacked on the hiney, probably either. I don't know if they still do that. They used to. Right? That's how they got the first cry. Is that an urban legend, Diane, or is that true? They weren't doing it then? Okay, maybe it's urban legend. I thought that they whacked them on the hiney. Isn't that what they do in the movies? They whack, and then the baby cries. Nobody remembers it because maybe it never happened. But nobody remembers that birthing moment because now what we're saying is if that's the property at hand, this moves that scale way beyond being born. See what I'm saying? So to me, this is one of the easier arguments to say, okay, if we're going to work with your argument that they don't become real persons until they have certain properties, then we're going to say that would also be true of people who are in comas, someone who loses something that they don't regain. All right, so let's go to the second one. Human persons, and this is a little bit similar, human non-persons. This is a grounding human rights and human equality into one's ability. Grounding human rights and human equality into one's ability. Distinguishing between human non-person and human persons. So infanticide would be fine, and we just built on that argument if you continued this. And basic human rights would be coming in varying degrees. So imagine this, and maybe the question would be best worded like this. If a person loses sentience, let's think about the various possibilities of that happening. Most of the time it's going to be in a coma, right? Someone who loses the ability to have self-awareness. Or let's imagine that they have some type of brain injury. It's not a coma, but it is a brain injury that they lose memory either short-term or long-term. With this argument, there's now going to be less abilities which would make them less human persons. The third thing they say is many non-human animals would now qualify. So if you place it in the category of abilities, we're now taking it out of the species because now there are certain abilities that an animal might have that even a human at certain points in their life don't have. And then finally, this will really fall apart with capacity, which brings us to number 3. Grounding human rights and human equality into one's ability. No more versus not yet. Here's a good question to ask. If we can agree that brain death is the end, well, this is a good question that they ask, not one that we ask. If we can agree that brain death is the end of a person, then can we not agree that brain function is the beginning of a person? So this can stump you, and I want to see how you would respond to this. Here is the curveball that you're sent. You're having a conversation about choice change, and they say to you, hey, can we agree that brain death is the end of a person? Time where you're going to make these end-of-life decisions about pulling the plug, as it's called. If you can agree that brain death is the end of a person, then can we not agree that brain function is the beginning of a person? How would you answer that? Anybody got any idea? Maybe you've used the illustration of the coma. So you've talked about this person who was in a motorcycle accident and they're comatose. And so they've now taken your argument, your illustration about temporary loss of sentience, and you've tried to make the point that that doesn't mean they're less human, but now they turn it on you. And so they turn it on you by saying, okay, can we agree that a person who's brain dead is also, their life is over? Can we also agree that brain function is the beginning of the person? Back to sentience. How would you answer that? Cora. Excellent answer. What Cora is saying is that one has potential and the other doesn't. Now, we understand if a person is in one of these, end of death decisions we're making as a family, and the person is declared brain dead, there's no possibility for that person to ever regain that function. Versus someone who has been brain injured or damaged, and the possibility is that they could still live a life, but the other person, minus the removing of the artificial life, would die. The body would begin to decompose because the brain is completely dead. We're talking about potential versus non-potential, and to compare that with an embryo is to say that the embryo is in the same situation where it never has the possibility of brain function. I think in most ethics that we would agree that you do not pull the plug if there's the possibility that this is what? Temporary, right? It's not reversible. We're talking about irreversible situations. Those are the kinds of decisions where we would make a decision about pulling the plug. An embryo actually is an organism that can function without a brain. Now, let that soak in for a moment. We're back to embryology. But an embryo, for a temporary moment, can function without a what? But it's not going to stay like that. What's going to happen is that embryo develops, it's going to develop, and it's not in an irreversible state. It's going to develop, it's going to have a brain, and so therefore, just like someone who we're considering pulling the plug on, if it can be reversed, ethically we would say it would be wrong to what? To end the life. Same thing's true with the embryo. So the way to answer that question, it may seem like a real curveball at first, is to exactly what Cora said. This is a different category. We're talking about one that's irreversible, one that's not developing, can't ever get out of this situation, versus one who is developing and left unharmed will develop fully in most cases. Anybody want to add anything to that or thoughts about that? That's kind of a common little curveball that comes at you on personhood. And here's one we'll finish with. Is human exceptionalism the root of evil? Now, we're not talking about American exceptionalism here, so you patriots, settle down. We're talking about human exceptionalism. In other words, do you believe, and this comes back to your biblical worldview without quoting a Bible passage, do you believe that human beings are created as the crown of creation and not just like more progressed animals, but actually a special creation of God that are made, as we understand, in the Imago Dei, made in the image of God. So animals not like that. So here's the question sometimes you'll get. So if you are pro-life, why do you value humans more than animals? That's the question. Why do you value humans more than animals? Now, you may immediately have an answer for that, but I'm wondering, what about answering that rather than saying, well, I'm going to go back to creation, I'm going to go back to being created in the image of God. Sometimes you can expose that people have value systems that don't really acknowledge no exceptionalism by simply saying, do you think that if a dog eats a hamster that they should get the life penalty or life in jail? I mean, do you think that animals should be given the same ethical punishments for killing other animals as humans killing other humans? Now, the other thing you could say is one of the things that marks human exceptionalism is that we, by our desire to protect human life, also care for what? Animal life. That's why people like Michael Vick got some time behind bars when he had 52 pit bulls that he was fighting, and he was killing the ones that weren't strong enough. They would let these dogs starve, and then they would let them, just emaciate each other for entertainment. And rightly so, people were up in arms about that. That's not how you treat an animal. But actually what was happening there, we were not saying that animals and humans are on the same category. It was another mark of human exceptionalism. Human exceptionalism says that even though they're a lower created order, we care for their lives and we care for them and we're good stewards of them. So I think the question here is that you push back on, we believe that humans are of a greater created order than animals. And the way to say that is to simply make a comparison. We keep bringing this up. I think analogies are best. So when you bring up that we do not believe that animals should suffer death penalties or life in jail, we're not taking them to court. There's no jury here in the case when one cat kills another cat, okay? Again, we're not going to get on cats here, but we understand that there's a difference between the animal life and human beings. And usually those conversations are pretty easy with an analogy. All right, any questions? We got 2 minutes here on just some principles to bring to the conversation on the human rights argument. And back on the back of your handout, we have placed those arguments there together. And I want you to look one more time at the human rights argument. Can we agree that all humans should get the fundamental right to life? If something is growing, even from 1 cell to 2 cells to 4 cells, isn't it alive? If that living organism has human parents, isn't he or she a living member of the human species? And wouldn't that make abortion a human rights violation? So the human rights argument is really pointing towards the personhood of the human being. Got it? Questions? Next week, we're going to start hitting the top 10 pro-abort apologetics. So we're going to be on their turf next week. So we're going to move and shift to what are their best arguments and how do we answer them. I think it'll be fascinating and hopefully equipping. Okay? Sorry I was late. We got 1 minute. Any other questions? Any questions? I don't think we've had any yet. If you want to buy a car, see Glenn. Do you? Oh, I'll be over at your house this afternoon. I want it to look like Herbie, too, the Love Bug. You know, it's my favorite movie as a kid. I want it to be white. Yeah, number 53 on the side. I could take that to car shows, right? My kids say they would not go to school with me. I wouldn't have to take them to school anymore. They'd ride the bus every day because they don't want to ride in it. All right, guys, we'll see you in a few. God bless you.